Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Created Economy. It's our weekly interview series where we chat with the players from the creator economy at large and discuss the key topics impacting the growth of the industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Young, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Greg Narain. You can find new episodes of the show on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out our website at createdeconomy.com for more information, including recaps eventually and a list of upcoming guests. And speaking of guests, if you want to be a guest on the show, drop us a line, either Twitter, email, DM, whatever. And we also have a nice little form on our website on createdeconomy.com/guest list. And be sure to follow us everywhere on social media. Give us that like and subscribe. It'll help us, and we appreciate it very much. Now that we have all the housekeeping out of the way, let's welcome to the show Greg. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
I am good to go.
Yeah? All right. Well,
Let's make a
today
run for it.
we are definitely making a run for it. Today is we have a wonderful guest. He's the trifecta of the creator economy. He is an investor, he is a builder, and he is also somebody who has been working for one of the biggest tech platforms out there today. Let's welcome to the show our friend, Benjamin Grubbs. How's it going, Ben?
Doing well. Thanks, Ken and Greg, for having me here today.
No worries. For those that are listening and watching that don't know who Ben is, why don't we give a little bit of background here? Has more than 2 decades of experience in the online video and the creator economy space, especially with a focus on the Asia Pacific region. A lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show has been largely US focused, but of course we know the creator economy is global. So very interested to hear his thoughts. Also, Ben, you are a VC for Next 10 Ventures. And also, interestingly enough, you are a dual founder. You have co-founded both the Creator Plus and Collide. Very interested to hear how you started that. And you also led creator marketing for YouTube within the Asia region for 6 years. So thank you very much for joining the show. What fascinates you about the creator economy? Let's start with that.
I think today for creators in general, I mean, my interest with like media, communications, journalism goes back to when I was a kid. I got involved in journalism around the time when I was in middle school. So like writing for the school paper, editing the school yearbook. Then through high school, I was doing sports reporting on a radio station in San Francisco, worked on a live television show in San Jose, in sports as well. And then I was writing for one of the newspaper groups in the East Bay of San Francisco. So I've been at that time in the 90s coming up. There wasn't YouTube. And so I guess if you wanted to be a creator, you kind of had to work through like the traditional media players. Mm-hmm. And in my case, it was just calling people up, calling the radio station up and saying, hey, I heard about this show. And, I saw the name, of one of the producers. And so can you connect me to that person? And then they did. And then it was like, how do I work for you? And a little bit of like, who are you? And that type thing, but it was just hustling and, just trying to start, any which way I could. And, a lot of like just being a production assistant, and then you kind of work your way up, from there. And, so that was like my start in terms of like content and, the creativity or storytelling in that space. And that kind of carried on through school. And then later, in my working career.
Yeah. I mean, you've worked at Turner Broadcasting, you've worked at eBay, Yahoo. What was it about YouTube that really kept you there for 6 years? And then we could talk about your experience in Asia.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start like with the Asia piece because then it kind of gets into YouTube and Google. So, and I think I'm the youngest of 6 boys, and my brothers all went to school in California, and I felt I wanted to be different. So I went to school in New York, and they all studied abroad or did some kind of trips across Europe. So I wanted to do something different. So that was Asia. And so I had a a summer internship opportunity in Singapore, and it turned out to be with Yahoo. So that's actually what brought me to Asia, and then into Yahoo. And my goal was to kind of have a good summer internship, get a recommendation letter, finish up my final year of school, and maybe go back to the Bay Area and work in Silicon Valley. And at the end of the summer, it was conversation around staying in Singapore and continuing to work at Yahoo. And they were gonna launch Yahoo Broadcast, and so it was the Broadcast.com acquisition that they made in '99, Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner's company, which at the time was like the biggest audio video platform on the internet globally. And so it was bringing that company and that technology out into the Asia region. So it seemed like a phenomenal opportunity, and they were talking to me about like taking the charge of that across Southeast Asia, India, and Australia, New Zealand markets. So that's what got me into the video space, at that time in the Asia region. And then my thread throughout my career was kind of around communications, and so I had a stint with eBay in marketing and communications, and so overseeing marketing and PR across emerging markets, so Southeast Asia, and then I got up to Hong Kong with them. And then with Turner, it was an opportunity to go work inside of a large media company. At the time was Time Warner was the parent company. Now Warner Media or Warner Brothers Discovery keeps changing. They keep changing the name. Yeah, so at that time I was interested in kind of being, just working on the inside and trying to be a sponge and learn what I could in that large media organization. And I was overseeing their digital business across Asia. And then I think when I was, with eBay or even Yahoo, it was a lot of like playing offense, and you were disrupting, some traditional kind of industry. And, Turner was a lot of protecting the legacy business. That they made a lot of money at the time through, programming television channels and distributing those on cable systems. And so, having 4 or 5 year long contracts, and, the cable systems paying up front, or paying for those over a 5-year term. So you had revenue kind of locked in. And, I was actually looking at how to build a digital business within that kind of, ecosystem. And a lot of it was, well, don't put the video content out online because that's going to cannibalize TV ratings. And so there's a lot of like protect and defend the kind of core business, and, it's try to innovate, but within like guardrails. And, I ultimately there's a lot of playing defense, and I like playing offense. And so when the opportunity kind of came up to join YouTube, that to me just felt like going back to playing offense. And, I joined there in 2012, and, it was just a small team in the Asia region, and a lot of just like, really basic ecosystem building. And so that's kind of when I came into Yahoo, was that eBay was that. Turner was a little bit of that again across the digital business, and the YouTube piece attracted me because of just that early stage nature.
Yeah. I have one more question before I'll turn it over to Greg. As we here in the US, we see, we talk about, Instagram and Facebook versus YouTube versus, and all of these versus Snap, and everyone's kind of scared of TikTok. And you look at, and I'm curious, outside of, the continental US, what's the vibe of the creator economy, overseas? People are wondering like, oh, how did TikTok blow up so fast and become so successful? And you look at what's happening in Asia, and like in China with like ByteDance and everything. They're like, oh, well, that's kind of been there for many years. What are people not getting about the creator economy space in the Asia Pacific region?
I wouldn't say it's not so much of them not getting anything about the ecosystem. I mean, I think how the internet has worked in China for a long time is somewhat different than how it's worked here in the West, or in the States. And so that's like that part. And then in markets like Japan and Korea, I think there's been a lot of innovation actually out of those markets for years. And I think when I was at eBay, this is back in the early 2000s, e-commerce plus like social and community, or like this actually what we talk about a lot today in like social commerce, like that was happening in Korea in like 2005. And then when I came into YouTube and Google in 2012, so I remember back in like 2010 in Korea, there was a local platform that had people live streaming and then generating quite a lot of money, $500,000 US dollars or more a year through tips. And then, years later, I'm talking with some product manager at YouTube in San Bruno about some new innovation of live streaming with virtual gifting. And I thought, like, this isn't new. Like, I remember this years ago, actually in Korea. But maybe because like you don't speak or read, write, Korean, you weren't then understanding what was happening in the market. But it's not like it didn't exist.
Mhm.
It was there all along. There was early innovation in gaming, in the free to play microtransaction that all emerged out of Asia first, and then it came into the U.S. So what I learned long ago was that there is a lot of innovation happening in the Asia region. Then it comes to the U.S. Then it gets adopted by some tech company in Silicon Valley, and then it goes into other international markets like Southeast Asia or India. And so what I kind of thought was like, actually, maybe it's better to have people and resources on the ground in markets like Tokyo or Seoul or Shanghai or Beijing. You can actually kind of be closer to where there's a lot of this early innovation. So, and it's continuing to kind of play out in a lot of different kind of industries and fields. So again, I wouldn't say it so much as like they don't get it. I think they've actually they've understood this for a while. They're operating in their own way, and maybe just because they don't go off and explain it, it doesn't mean that they don't understand it or it's not actually occurring. It's there.
Yeah. Greg, any questions for Ben?
Yeah, hi Ben. Thanks for joining us today. Look, the creator economy, I guess, is also changing quite a bit. And I do feel, especially in like Creator Plus, we move from like an independent, I think, solo, initiative, like where creators sort of made on their own, they were creating on their own, to, there's a pretty well established kind of cottage industry, like around the creator ecosystem or around individual creators. That was sort of like that middle phase. I don't know if it was that long lived per se, but I guess now, like, looking like Creator Plus and things like that, it seems like a lot of the future is around collabs and sort of like, building things together. How do you see that continuing to play out, I guess, like, as the creator economy continues to evolve now, right? Like, do you think there'll be bigger productions, or will it be a lot of like more of these dynamics or dyads and things like that?
I think within the ecosystem, what I've learned over time is that there's many types of creators. They have different motivations and passions. They're not all seeking the same thing. And so to just kind of like lump it all together and it's like everyone's after the same thing is short-sighted or just kind of not correct. And so then it's a little bit of kind of seeing like why are people choosing this of all things they could do with their waking hours? Why this? And then what are they striving to kind of do? So I think that's one piece I kind of found. And then from there, it's then seeing, okay, if you then start to talk about like support and resources or, products or services, you could find there's different needs, based on what you're striving to do. So, I find that there's some people that are really motivated by storytelling and, or just, entertainment and producing content. There's some that are actually building a business and they are an entrepreneur and they're operating in that way every day, and a way to kind of market the business that they've actually formed is through video content. And so they're really adept at content marketing, which someone might see them as the creator, but then there's actually a business behind actually what they're doing. Some others are really trying to educate and enrich. Some are trying to like inform, news or opinion, and some are just promoting. It's like there is a business there and actually having a social graph and a following, and you get paid for that. But back to the first, it's like, for storytellers, how do you go from an idea, script to screen, and that whole value chain? There's a lot of different pieces in there. There's a lot of different ways of which companies can exist to support creators in that storytelling kind of process. Similarly, if you're really trying to run a business as an entrepreneur, there's a value. In some ways, you could argue a different value chain. So there could be different kind of companies to exist within the ecosystem, on that front. similarly to education, similarly to kind of news and information. So that's something I've kind of observed a lot, actually, when I was at YouTube, and then just thinking about like the platform and the role of the platform, and then this like third party kind of ecosystem and how those two kind of ideally collaborate and not kind of compete. But then just seeing, okay, there's different reasons why creators kind of come to a platform like YouTube. And so then as you think about that third party ecosystem, there's going to be some segmentation or differentiation that'll exist there.
Cool. So let's talk about your role, your time as an investor, right? I mean, I'm curious to hear what your experience has been like, and any advice you give to founders who are out seeking money for this. I mean, you are the main partner behind Next 10 Ventures, and as I was researching it, the Next 10 is actually the philosophy you have behind it is very, very interesting, because you believe that entrepreneurs should focus on creating a business that lasts the next 10 years. Would that be fairly accurate?
Yeah, and I think that came from, again, the time when I was at YouTube, and going back at like a decade or more ago. It was, hey, is this a fad, or is this a real industry, and is this an industry that is going to grow from strength to strength? And when I would talk with creators, at Google, there was a lot of this like notion of 10x and 10x kind of thinking. And I was also then thinking of that from 10x, like 10-year kind of horizon. And so when I had an opportunity to kind of sit with the creator, I'd ask them what is their 10-year game plan. I would see a response a lot of times like 10 years, like I'm just trying to figure out like the next week or next month, maybe let alone like the next year.
Yeah.
But it was a thought exercise of like, stretch your thinking and kind of think out to that kind of horizon. How are you building, a career here? And we at YouTube, we had annual creator summits in different regions, and then we would bring in, guest speakers. And one year, there was a famous Hollywood star who came in, who actually had a 30-year long career that went from music to television to film. And it was like there was every, say, 6 to 10 years, there was a resetting, or a switch, is a way in which they were switching gears in kind of a new industry, and remaking actually who they are, to kind of stay somewhat fresh and kind of grow. But then you look back at that and it's like, oh, there's a 30-year kind of career. I remember we were thinking about this a lot at YouTube. It's like, which of these top creators on the platform are still going to be going strong in 10 years, 20 years from now? Or is there a shelf life to these creators, like maybe a professional athlete? And, do you only get so many good years out of these creators, and then it's on to the next? And as the company was investing a lot actually into the creators that are actually coming to the platform, it kind of felt like, well, hopefully we're kind of putting, investment into folks that then have a longer term kind of payoff than just a 3, 4, or 5 year time span. So that was some of the background there, I guess, around that thinking. And there's an investment program that I was overseeing between 2015 and 17, where we were deploying quite a lot of money actually into investing into creators as a business. And so in some cases, we had to actually have people go set up legal entities so they can actually receive the money from YouTube for that investment. And then through that, we were asking, I was asking the team, and this was done on a global level, how do we go and develop a joint business plan, with the creator that we're actually investing into? And so through that business plan is trying to understand the strategy and the roadmap that they have. And so if we're going to put money into their business, let's understand where that money is actually going, the use of those funds, and what that's actually meant to go off and generate. Expecting that, like, if this has success and somewhat longevity, it's going to pay itself back into what they reinvest into YouTube.
Right. But I think from an investor side, right? I mean, there's one thing to invest in the individual creator, like myself. But for example, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs such as Greg, who is trying to work with creators, right? Work in that space. And he's trying to say, hey, Ben, I'm pitching you to fund my business. How would you advise him and other startups, entrepreneurs, how to think about the next 10? Because they're like, I think obviously startups need to think of it in general about the next 10, what happens in the next 10 years, assuming they get there. But they also have to think about the creators as well. So it's like they have to think about two different dimensions in terms of longevity, right? In terms of for their how they want to grow, how they want to reach their audience. Because I think it's a little bit different from saying like, oh, our target market are mom and dads, or average consumer, right? I think it's a little bit different. So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs on that front?
So I guess I would start with like the nature of the business that the entrepreneur is actually building. Is it an enterprise kind of B2B focused company business, or is it a consumer B2C consumer facing? And I think on the enterprise side, which is actually kind of where I was starting when I left Google in early 2018. There was this phase, I think, between 15 and 18, where there are a lot of top creators on YouTube that were leaving multi-channel networks, and they were actually wanting to work directly, with YouTube. And I was the head of the global top creator partnerships team, and we only had so many resources. We could only manage so many creators, but there were far more creators that actually warranted the team's attention, and far more creators that were actually outward seeking the team's attention. So it was like, wow, okay, what to do? So if the enterprise ecosystem then was the multi-channel networks, and if the top creators are actually leaving them and not wanting to work with them, and then YouTube can't handle all of this demand, it's like, then there needs to be some other part of the ecosystem that exists. And if it's not this like all encompassing multi-channel network, maybe it's actually going to be companies that are focused around tech and tools. And if you look at, again, the value chain, and if there's a dozen things that a creator is kind of seeking or needing, there could be companies actually across all dozen links of that value chain. So that's where I started, and it was kind of looking at that space. And then you can look at that by the need. You could also look at that by a geography kind of focus. So as I was interacting, or again, I would say as an entrepreneur, if you're kind of building more of the enterprise kind of focus piece. The other piece I guess I was looking at then was, is someone building something that a platform like YouTube is just choosing not to focus on and do, or is this just a matter of time before YouTube goes off and it's going to build it itself?
Mm-hmm.
So then I was also kind of looking at what is the longevity of that company existing and doing what they do. And again, my context a lot was YouTube, but then since I left the company, I've been thinking broader of a lot of different platforms. But that's another piece I would kind of look at as an entrepreneur, if I'm building an enterprise focused company, is the defensibility of actually what I'm building. And is this something that a platform can just adopt as a feature? And you're going to have an issue kind of in the market. If it's consumer facing, then you're kind of looking at audience segments and potential behavior changes. And so when I was the lens I was kind of looking at things is when I was at eBay, and when I joined, it was like the leader in e-commerce. It's not anymore. But when I was there, it was like serving a lot of buyers and sellers. But over time, there was this verticalization, of e-commerce and eBay itself. And later when I joined YouTube, I was witnessing the same thing. There's this verticalization of video, and YouTube's trying to be video for everyone for like lots of different kind of use cases, but it only has so many product managers and engineers, and it can't actually go and put its full focus and attention across every different kind of lane. So in some ways, YouTube is beneficial in that it's bringing a lot of people online, billions of people online, but you can start to super serve some of those consumer segments really well, just from a consumer lens, and actually build a pretty respectable business. And we've seen that actually play out over time. Mm-hmm. So if I'm an entrepreneur on that side, again, I'd be looking at kind of the target market from a demographic standpoint, or again, from a geographic kind of standpoint. And, are you betting on some kind of behavioral change? And that's a space you're going into. And then similarly, you get into, how are you scaling that and your defensibility in the space that you're playing in?
Cool. Greg, any other questions you have for Ben?
Yeah, I guess are there areas do you think are worth taking a better look at, right? Like now, I agree that the value chain is certainly evolving, and there are certainly more pieces, and there's more growth in a lot of these areas. Are there areas that you're sort of keen or interested in, or thinking about, for future endeavors, or maybe like from an investment point of view?
For me, it's I guess across the different the different segments that I was talking about earlier. So, I kind of look at creators as storytellers, and so what kind of came out of that was there are a number of investments that I actually have and companies that I advise, and then Creator Plus is a company that I co-founded that is focused in that area. There's a lot of growth and opportunity and pretty interesting things happening in the areas of gaming and sport. So that's an area that I've also been kind of playing in. Also in the area of e-commerce, it's a sector I've kind of been in for going back to my time at eBay. I have exposure through a number of companies, again, from investing and advising, and then looking again where things are evolving there of interest. I think the kid space, I was part of the team that launched YouTube Kids. Continue to see a lot of future growth and opportunity there. There's been a lot of M&A activity over the last 2 years, which has been some nice kind of validation of the sector of creators kind of even just building YouTube channels and exiting a YouTube channel for pretty nice multiples. And so I don't think that's like a short-term thing. I think we'll continue to see that kind of play out. And then in the space of education, where I've had exposure, and I think there's still a lot of upside there. And then so you take those areas, those 5, and then I also then look at the geographic side. And here in the U.S. where there's growth and opportunities, but similarly, I spent the entire summer in Asia and parts of the Middle East, and there's still a lot of green field, I would say, out on those markets. As much as I was saying earlier that there's like early innovation, there's also, I think, a lot of upside and opportunity there.
So let's talk about the dual startups that you're working on. And like, I have no idea how you manage to have so much time in your day that you're able to do these type of things. But these are 2 interesting companies. One we talked about, you've mentioned many times, Creator Plus. It's a film and premium video on demand streaming platform for digital first storytellers. And then you also have co-founded a influencer marketing firm called Collide. Can you tell us the origin stories behind these companies?
Yeah, so Collide came out of my relationship with Google and working there. And so in the Asia region, there's brands and marketers that are trying to market their company outside of their home territory. And so there's a cross-border kind of marketing segment. And so one of the problems that was existing is that the marketer was existing in the Asia region, could place and buy media through the Google sales team, so by search or by TrueView. But when it came to them wanting to do in-video kind of advertising, and working with the creator, but actually wanted to market that into, say, the North America region or European region, you now have to start to interface with the creator, and it's not a programmatic way you can just buy that through Google. And so the issue that was existing was that the creators in those regions are managed by a partnerships team that's local there, but that partnerships team then works with a local sales team. And so there wasn't a lot of cohesion across regions. And so the team at Google reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is the problem. We know this problem. Can you help us actually go and solve it?" So that was the origin behind Collide. I think for Creator Plus was, for years talking with creators and asking their hopes and aspirations, or kind of their reason for being. And someone kind of telling me that their end game is not making YouTube videos, but it's to be a filmmaker. And I was like, great. So like, what are you doing to kind of like get there? And there's a lot of support. There's things that they don't know. And so it's like, how do you not say, oh, because you haven't done it, then you can't do it. But then how do you get them to that stage where they can actually, go direct a feature film, or participate in other types of creative process actually around the making of film, which is where there's a desire there. And so that was like one part of it. I think the other piece was just back in 2020, with the pandemic kind of shutting movie theaters. I was just chatting with a number of people in the capital market side. It was, so what's happening post pandemic? Are people going to go back to the theater at the rate they were pre-pandemic? And I have three kids, 8, 10, and 13, who love watching movies, but never once were complaining because they couldn't watch them in a theater. And so I was looking at that, like my kids and people at that age, and it's like, yeah, so where are they going over the next 10 years? And as they grow into, teens and young adults, is this like next generation of movie going audience going to look very different? Is there more of this, at home and direct to consumer? Is there a at home and direct to consumer opportunity, there? And if there is that, if there's behavior change, this goes back to the consumer kind of piece I was mentioned before. And so if that exists, well, how would you play into that? And what are the things that you could do in a digital distribution and through D2C around audience and community building that maybe just don't exist in a traditional kind of distribution where you're putting a film through theater? It's really just that the combination of the two is like, say, the supply side, of the creator and kind of hopes and desires and wanting to participate. And these are folks that entertain people on a daily basis, build large communities, have shown propensity to monetize that community through D2C, but largely through apparel and merchandise. But none of them ever kind of aspire to be a fashion designer, but that's where they also make a lot of money. But they are, content creators at heart. So it's like, well, how do we kind of have them continue to kind of play into what they would maybe classify as their core, which is creating content, and then this other side of the consumer market and just where the pandemic was, reshaping some, behavior, and not just here in the U.S., but that on a global level. So that was the kind of mixture of things, and then talking with people at that time, it was like, yeah, we'd love to kind of have some kind of vehicle participate in that space, and then that's where I was like, I'm definitely interested to help kind of shape and put that together. So it was like, yeah, there's no company that I know of that's actually kind of doing this. So, let's go create one. And that was the origin of Creator Plus.
Nice. Greg, any final questions for Ben before we wrap this up?
No, I think it's great, Ben. I appreciate like sort of the broad view here, because, I think part of, I think a lot of folks who enter the creator economy are sort of like new to it. Right. And they don't have like the whole history to understand like, the slow moving parts as well as the fast moving parts. Right. So I definitely appreciate sort of like having both sensibilities, like at the same time, like in what's moving inside the space.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys taking the time as well.
Hey, no worries. One thing, Ben, do you prefer being an entrepreneur or prefer being an investor?
I would say more of an entrepreneur and a builder. But I think the part for me, what I've enjoyed over the years, through my corporate career, I was connecting with entrepreneurs, and then I was also, a lot of my ex-colleagues from my Yahoo and eBay days then became VCs. So they would hit me up from, time to time, kind of saying, hey, what companies am I seeing that look interesting? And then I was just matchmaking and connecting folks. And then I had some people in my ear saying like, that's what people do as a day job. And like, you're just like connecting people as a favor. Mm-hmm. Like you can actually get paid for that. And I was like, I enjoy my day job, like at Google or Turner, where I was before, on that front. But I think like, I love connecting with founders and entrepreneurs and kind of seeing the problems that, that excite them, that they're trying to actually, work on and solve for. And there's a lot of like inspiration that I kind of get out of those interactions, and seeing again where I can be helpful from my own background and experience, working across, again, the Asia region for a long time, and, also here in the US, and then across all these like bigger media tech companies and the platforms. But then I do lock in on things that I can't get out of my mind from time to time. And it's like, well, yeah, I don't see anyone kind of doing this. So I could wait around and wait around for a founder to kind of come meet me. Or it's like, I'll just start kind of talking to people and saying like, someone should really be onto this. And like, hey, do you want to go and collaborate? So that's actually what I enjoy doing. It's the mixture of the two. And it keeps me pretty energized. And it's it's a way for me to stay kind of learning and growing on a daily basis.
Cool. Well, for those that are watching, those that are interested and want to know more about Ben's thoughts, he does have a Substack newsletter, benjamingrubbs.substack.com. And also be sure to check out Creator Plus and Collide for more information about what he's doing. Some great companies. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. Albeit it's very brief, but we very much appreciate your time and your insights into the creator economy. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thanks for being here, Ben.
Awesome. All right. So that wraps up another episode of the Created Economy. Oh my God. I don't even know the name of our show anymore. But anyways, thanks so much. Great seeing you, Greg. And everybody tune in next time for another wonderful episode of the Created Economy. We will see you guys later. Bye.